Welcome to the Human Experience Podcast, the only podcast designed to fuse your left and right brain hemispheres and feed it the most entertaining and mentally engaging topics on the planet. As we approach our ascent, please make sure your frontal, temporal and occipital lobes are in their full upright position. As you take your seat of consciousness, relax your senses and allow us to take you on a journey. We are the Intimate Strangers. Thank you for listening.
What's up, guys? This is our interview with Mr. Dick Sutphen. He has had quite a long-standing career, and he's been doing this since the 1970s or so. And him and his wife, Roberta, are two of the sweetest people I've ever encountered. Just really open, kind, warm-hearted people. And I've been listening to his tapes for so long, so I just wanted to bring him on and see what his perspective was. It really is interesting when you dig into how many hypnosis sessions Mr. Sutphen has done. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this conversation. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on Twitter at TheHumanXP, and also give our Facebook page a like. And thank you so much for listening. The Human Experience is putting you into a deep hypnotic trance as we speak to my guest, Mr. Dick Sutphen. He is the author of million-copy bestseller, You Were Born to Be Together. He is the founder of Valley Sun Publishing. He has created over 300 mind programming CDs, and over 190,000 people have attended his seminars. Richard, that is quite the resume, sir. Welcome to HXP.
Well, thank you very much, Xavier. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure. So I kind of laid the foundation of who you are here a bit in the intro, but for the people that don't know, could you just give us your background, please?
Okay, well, I started out in the advertising field, working with major advertising agencies around the country, and it was art directors' work. And I started writing with the copywriters, and as a result, I wrote about what I was experiencing in just my hobby work, metaphysics, hypnosis, things along that line. And it became quite popular. I eventually started to do some hypnosis work. I studied to be a hypnotist, and started hypnotizing clients, hypnotizing anybody that was willing to sit still for it. And that was very effective. And I started experimenting with techniques that could take it, what seemed to me, a lot further than people were taking it. And I got into it because I was interested in the metaphysical side. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really interested in being a hypnotherapist. And yet, I was challenged by it, the fact that you could use the techniques to effectively heal people, resolve problems, find the cause of the problems in their life if the problems went back to other lifetimes, and usually they did. So I kept experimenting with it, and I started writing books, and Simon & Schuster was my major publisher, and I wrote about, I think, 7, 8 of them for Simon & Schuster and for other publishers along the way. And that's basically it, Xavier.
That's quite the career. So how many hypnosis sessions do you think that you've done total? Let's give or take.
Oh boy, the hypnosis sessions are thousands. I couldn't even begin to tell you, because so many of the sessions that I've done have been in seminars. They have been to demonstrate techniques in seminars, but I would say several 5, 6, 7, 8,000 at least sessions where a client has sat down with me in whatever room I was or office I was doing hypnosis in at the time, and has gone on a journey. So,
Interesting. So what exactly is happening when you are putting someone into a state of trance or hypnosis?
well, it's easy to put someone into a state of hypnosis. I use mind electronics techniques probably as much as anybody does because I invented the techniques that are so effective. But that'll be a matter of a sound. Uh, and the sound will be played in the background in the office. And I will then talk them down into an altered state of consciousness. And I like to work in a theta level. So I'm bringing them down into theta, which is the state at which they're most likely to see visions. It's the state of consciousness. It's called the hypnagogic state. And it's where Einstein used to go every afternoon after lunch. He laid down to take a nap, which really wasn't a nap, to alter his consciousness. And then he'd come up and he would come up with all these ideas. And so when Einstein talked about doing that, he was going into hypnosis and he was channeling his awareness, his ideas, his discoveries.
Yeah, that's incredibly intriguing. So you mentioned a metaphysic aspect of the hypnosis. What was the most remarkable thing that you found that these people were experiencing?
Okay, well, that's the primary reason I went into it in the first place, was to explore past lives. The concept of being born in a series of reincarnations, and the fact that these past lives would be affecting the present life. And if someone had a particular hang up or problem or something they were dealing with that they couldn't explain in a context of their normal life, why, I would take them back to the cause. And this initially was really all I was doing with it. It was all I cared about doing with the work. But they would go back to the cause. And I oftentimes would not tell them to go back into a past life. I would say, let's go back to the cause, wherever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go back to another time, another place, and more often than not, they would go back to another life. So when they started to describe lifetimes, the moment they'd start talking about their experiences, it would be very obvious that they were not talking in the context of this life, just lapsed into Dutch and just went on with Dutch. And I have always a tape recorder right beside.
Dutch is a hard language.
It's a hard language, and ancient Dutch is a lot harder language.
Wow.
And so I recorded it and asked her if I could give it to someone who might know. And this was the head of language at Arizona State University. So I took it down there and I had him listen to it. And he said, "Oh my God, that is Dutch." But he said, "Where did you ever find old Dutch like this? Who could still speak like this?" I explained to him that it was coming from a young woman who was hypnotized, and he was, that was out of his realm. He really, I don't think, was too much interested in that, but a lot of people were. And so it was the beginning of checking out to see if the situations being discussed, if another language was used, and I oftentimes asked them, could you speak up and speak in the language of your day? Back in 1714 in the Netherlands. And I'd say about half the time, people just easily would go right into the other language, the ancient language that they were speaking in. So, and this proved not to be anything very unusual at all. Most hypnotists I found who were used to doing a lot more work than I had done at the beginning, they'd all experimented with this sort of thing, and so they all had experiences along this line.
Well, I've personally listened to your tapes, and switching gears a little bit here, but I love your stuff. I mean, I use there's a few ones that I use. There's like a confidence zapper which I use, which is great, and there's a few others that I use every day. But let's rewind a little bit.
Well, thank you for doing that. I want to insert thank you.
They're amazing to listen to. So let's go back to advertising, because you discuss these other areas, and I mean, in your talk, The Battle for Your Mind, you talk about brainwashing and hypnotic techniques being used by religions, and how does this process happen, and how can we be aware? You had a career in advertising, so...
Well, it's not very difficult to hypnotize someone, Xavier. All you would have to do in a simple form would be to create a quiet environment. Churches are being built today because they know the power of the meditative state. Often churches will use meditation as part of their service. So if you put somebody with a low lighting put them in a low lighting environment, and you play music where there is no tension or no resolve, such as Oriental music, why you create an environment in which, if you just speak in a paced voice about like this, you will put someone into a deep hypnotic sleep. And so you can do this very easy, even without somebody realizing it's what's going on. I can smooth my voice out and strike just about any speed, and I'll usually bring it down to about 45 beats a minute. And if I used pacing and I'm in a quiet environment, and even if I'm not in a real quiet environment, I can usually hypnotize just about anyone if I've set out to do that. But if you were working on your computer, I'm a writer, I write books. And so if I'm spending all day writing without being interrupted very often, I am going into a theta level of consciousness simply as part of the environment. It's all it takes. But there are so many situations which are conducive to an altered state. I used to be a runner, and I'd go out every morning. I'd put on my running shoes, and I would put in at least 2-3 miles. Oftentimes, maybe 5-6 miles. Well, after you reach about the first mile, you just lapse into a state where you're running, but you don't even realize that there's no pain. You're just flying.
Right.
And at that point, you are in a deep state of hypnosis. And so when it first started to happen, I remember writing some articles for some of the running magazines, and I would talk with the writers who were doing it much more seriously than I. And I'd say, well, is there anything that that you find common to all runners? And the answer was, yeah, Richard, primarily the runners are the most mellow people on the planet. And of course, anybody that spends a lot of time at a theta level, if they do this twice a day, they probably are not going to come back into a full waking state of consciousness. And so you're putting people, they're putting themselves into hypnosis. So many of the runners at the time would be running along, and then they would say, oh my God, I'm floating above myself, watching myself run down the street. And they simply had left their bodies because they had lapsed into probably the theta level for sure. And at that point, it was very easy for them to be running down the street and watching themselves from above.
Would you say that most people are susceptible to these types of techniques?
I would say yes, absolutely. Watching television, I believe it was Thomas Mulholland was a doctor back in Boston, and he did a lot of experimental work with how long young children, how long if they turned on the TV, how long would it take them to be able to go into hypnosis? And sometimes it was as short a period as 10 seconds, especially when you take a look then over the years at the way advertising agencies have used hypnotic techniques to deepen the state when people are watching.
So if we can zoom out a bit and kind of cover the other aspects of your work, because I mean your tapes cover a lot of things, and you've written a lot of different books on like soul agreements and like assertiveness and how to become more assertive and how to instantly read people. But this idea of soul agreements, I mean, how did you move into this sort of line of thought that we maybe have agreements with other people and we're karmically connected? How did you get into that?
Well, really, that goes back to my first book, You're Born Again to Be Together, primarily, Xavier. The idea that we come together with other people, it's by plan. People who've been together before, say many times, they're going to come back and they're going to be together again. And so there are often times, and I mean often, that an individual will be born into the same family that they lived in before. So, in other words, you might be your own grandpa. And so I have a lot of little cases I will use to describe this.
Was there, I mean, if we zoom out some more, was there something that you would attribute as the source of all of this? Were you able to ever find I mean, when you talk about this, I picture a sort of lattice of interconnected sort of threads, or like a source of all things. I mean, were you able to get to that point? Was there anything that you found that kind of blew your mind?
My mind is constantly continues to be blown. And my wife's does too. I would say that over the years, and there's been quite a few years now, it's spirit and the involvement of spirit with our life. And when you are looking for how spirit, and when I say that, I'm really talking about God. The idea God is more and more and more real to me, and God would interact with us in ways that I just can't deny. And so I see an awful lot of the magical things that I didn't use. I was raised Presbyterian, but I didn't take it very seriously. Over the years, though, as I got older, I continued to read, I continued to study, and then called upon God's help several times, and sometimes where there was an answer, a very quick answer, and there's no way to deny it. So that would be the glue that held it all together, that we are souls who are here to learn. We're going to learn as fast or as slow as we decide to do it. We are going to learn. We're going to perfect our soul. And I can't, I'm number one, I can't tell you what that's going to mean if I do that.
That was my next question, actually.
Yeah. But I have studied with so many great people just as part of doing my work.
In your book, Earthly Purpose, your research led to a discovery that the 25,000 residents of this Mexican city all agreed to reincarnate together every 700 years or so for an important purpose. And
that sounds just so bizarre. I know that, but yes, that was I decided that when I wrote that book, I was going to have to write it with whatever came up. And then some things came up I didn't like. The people of Teotihuacan had the help of extraterrestrials. Well, that, I know extraterrestrials are real. People like Brad Stryker and other researchers are good friends of mine. And I've talked to them for years, and boy, they've convinced me. But I don't write about ETs and that sort of thing. And yet I said, well, if that's what comes up, I'm going to have to write about it. And then I had to swallow my words, because on that book in particular, everybody, and I had hundreds of participants in that book, and they saw or were involved with the extraterrestrials who helped to bring that civilization together when they needed to, and so on.
What purpose were they, and what was the purpose of their bringing together these people?
I would imagine, as best I can remember now, it's been a while since I wrote that one, but it was in regard to the technology. That's where the extraterrestrials seem to step in when we are in need of help. I have taken so many people back to the Atlantis lifetime. I think most people alive today were alive in Atlantis at one time or another. Edgar Cayce said Atlantis lasted for 100,000 years. So that's quite a span of history. I doubt that it was a very advanced civilization for all 100,000 years, but there was great ET involvement. Everything from carving the Great Pyramid that they used as a source, a power source, out of a mountain, and they developed a very advanced society in many ways like ours today, and a lot of our bad stuff today.
So Richard, why do you think our memories are erased when we reincarnate? I mean, wouldn't it be more advantageous if we remembered these past lives?
Well, I don't know, Xavier. It seems to me it's hard sometimes for people to deal with one past life. If you had to deal with hundreds or thousands of past lives, I think our egos could really get in the way, especially if you started finding out that you were somebody who wielded a lot of power or was great at a particular talent or something. And to try to deal with one lifetime, people have a hard time doing that. Now you have to deal with the complications of many lifetimes, and maybe many people who were enemies in your past lives, or people that really helped you it would become a logistical, in my mind, just a logistical impossibility, it would seem. And so it's not that they're hidden, but you're going to have to work on it to find them. But a past life regression, I mean, I don't think I've ever had anyone that I couldn't easily, if they were interested in the subject, I couldn't easily slide them in a state of hypnosis, or sometimes with the suggestion that they dream of a past life. And when they come into my office again next week, I could access that dream with hypnosis. But it's very easy to pick up the most important aspects. So oftentimes I will send somebody back. I'm hypnotizing them back into maybe the lifetime that is most affecting their current life. More often than not, that's what I'll instruct them to do. So I'm asking them to go back to a time in the one life, memories of the one life that's most affecting their current life. And wherever they land, so to speak, why I will start moving them around in time until we're moving into a situation where they are recalling something that seems to be important to them that they're coming in at this time. Maybe they are trying to find out why they've always had headaches. Well, this is a case, the Edie Fiore case. Edie Fiore and I are friends, and we worked together in the early stages of our careers. But this woman came to Edie, and she had horrible headaches, and she had no reason for them, but every week she'd come down where she was just incapacitated because of these awful migraine type of headaches. Edie took her back to the cause, and she found herself as a young girl, about 7 years of age. One day, the parents had said, well, watch your sister, and it just infuriated the precocious 7-year-old, who picked up a rock and slammed it down on the top of her little sister's head and killed her. And so, at that point, her father almost killed her. And
so these are trauma type events that you're going back to, essentially, and you're healing these traumas.
Yes, you go back to them. You forgive yourself. You forgive other people who are involved. It's more important that they go through the experience, and so they understand it. It's not something negative that's under the surface, just bubbling and boiling like that, where she felt so guilty that she'd killed her sister. So she grew up, and at the age of about 7, in the current life, she started having these headaches on a weekly basis. So you'll find this in every aspect of life. Oftentimes, when I'm teaching students to be hypnotists, I will go through a bunch of lifetimes that I can cover in about 5 to 8 minutes. I'll talk about a man, a true case that came to me, and he said, is there anything you can do to help me? I need to make more money, and I should be making more money, but every time I'm offered an advancement in my career, I just panic. I start to sweat, and I can focus upon nothing else. So I finally say no, just to keep myself from going crazy. And so I send him back to the cause to look at why he had an aversion to taking on more responsibility in his life. He saw himself as the captain of an old wooden sailing ship, and one night it caught fire. The captain should have been the last guy off the ship, but instead of arousing the men, making sure everyone got off the ship, he just ran and lowered one of the lifeboats and rowed away. And he was a complete coward in the way he dealt with it. The result of that, some of the men survived. He survived. They returned to the little town in England where they'd all come from. And, he was disgraced. He would never be given another skipper position on a sailing ship. And so he had lived probably several lifetimes in between, unwilling to take on more responsibility.
A full lifetime. I mean, you're expressing an entire lifetime trying to let go of this major experience. I mean, that blows me away. So, I mean, you have another one of my kind of favorite tapes that you've made is your wealth and success zapper. And you call them zappers, but they're supposed to zap you into this sort of, and they're very suggestive, and they kind of just repeat these phrases. But, I mean, what led you to do the wealth and success one?
For something like wealth and success, I would have been doing a tape that would round out the line, or a CD these days, or an MP3. But so it would be in there to round out the line. And I would bring out, and I know you said 300 titles that I've created. Actually, it's closer to 900 as my wife has been finding out, because oftentimes I would just, if I had something and I could replace it or bring out a variation that I thought could be more effective, why I did. And so that I've just done so many over the years, Xavier. So the wealth and success tape would be like most of the tapes or the CDs or the MP3s that I would create. I would just gather, I usually start with about 13 suggestions. So I would come up with the 13 suggestions that I felt might be most effective. And this would be one sentence long. And so with that, I will string together several techniques and the suggestions repeated over and over many times, and string them. If it was a zapper, why, that's 74 minutes of listening to me give you suggestions. And so if you listen to that very often, it's going to sink in, and it's going to be effective.
What was the message? I mean, after everything that you've seen and all of the past life regressions that you've done, and the metaphysical aspect of it, and these alien sort of encounters, I mean, what for you, what has been the most, I guess, the most strong thing that you have felt towards what our purpose is here and what we're doing here on the planet?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we have a lot of spiritual messages and lessons that we should pick up along the way, and we can apply the messages. A message such as, it is your resistance to what is that causes your suffering. Well, that message is so powerful. It's just so incredible. Your resistance to what is that causes your suffering. Well, now that's Buddha. And when he's talking about your resistance to what is, he's talking about all the things in life that you resist. And that's what's causing our suffering. We alone cause our own success and our own suffering. And I know this as well as I know anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I'm going to be writing about this on a different level and about the state of mind and about our resistance. And I've said things like this, not as eloquent as Buddha said them, but I mean, that one to me just knocks my socks off because we all resist so much in life. And as a result, the resistance is always fear. It's always what causes the suffering that we experience in our life. We are here and we should be experiencing lives of blessed freedom and joy. And all too often, we are creating lives very different as we go along the path.
Right.
So I know that that's what I'm going to have to write about, and I'm going to have to try to figure a way to bring people into a state of consciousness at which they can suggest or listen to a tape like you just described, or a MP3, and it'll be 100 times more effective because of the state, the level of mind that they are in at the time they request it. And I don't mean to be abstract or weird on this, and that's probably the best way I can describe it right now. I'm very excited about it.
Fair enough.
And
Fair enough.
I will send you one, okay? I guarantee you.
That sounds good to me. I was gonna move towards ending the conversation. We do have about 8 minutes here, but have you ever had? I mean, if we're talking about going into the past and our past lives, but have you ever tried going into the future and our future lives?
Yes. Yes.
And what was the result of that?
Well, the result was, if somebody is willing to want to do this, you can do it. You can go forward. I mean, it's a psychic. You could go to a good psychic today, and the psychic might be able to tell you a lot about your life to come. You can go, you don't need a psychic. You can go into a hypnotic state and progress forward in time, and you can see all this for yourself. I've got here at the company, I've got an MP3 or a CD called It's a Hypnosis Session, in which it's a future progression. And I have gone in always for a reason. I had a woman who was just almost hysterical because she couldn't figure out who she wanted to be with, her husband or her lover. And, that sounds silly, but, to her, that was the biggest question. She couldn't, until she got that solved, she figured she just couldn't go on. And so that's what she was looking for. And I thought, damn, well, I'm going to have to do something. So I moved her forward to the lifetime, her future lifetime, the next lifetime. And I then regressed her back from the future life into this one. And I said, what did you do? Did you marry your lover, or did you stay with your husband? And she said, I stayed with my husband. But now in this life, I could be with my lover. And so she was seeing, and who knows what she was really seeing, but she was satisfied by the experience of being able to see herself in a future life married to the man that was her lover in this life. And if that's not a convoluted
Yeah.
subject to end on.
Right.
What is, but it's very the work is very interesting. It never quits. My wife and I are just it never when a client, and I don't try to see that many clients anymore. I try to find time to write and explore other things, but I mean, we just always amazed at who's coming in the door and what they want to find out. But we can take them there. We can use hypnosis to take them back into the past, usually, and find out what caused this problem today, what caused the feelings they have today. And if they really have to see the future, we can do that one too.
Well, Richard, I really, truly appreciate your time, and I highly suggest that people check out the large scope of your work, because there is a lot of it, and it has helped me through the years quite a bit. And where can people find your website? How do they get there?
Just go to www.dicksutphen.com. That's the website, and we've got, I think, around 400 titles up there now, and we've got about 30 or 40 here. We're going to try to get up in the next month of some older titles, but we get them remastered, and they sound good, better than they did originally.
Excellent. Well,
Thank
Richard,
you.
Thank you so much for being here, sir. This is The Human Experience. My name is Xavier, and we are going to get out of here. We will see you guys next week.
Thanks, Xavier. Bye-bye.